Please save my daughter. My mother screamed across the emergency room. And for the first time in 5 years, she finally looked at me like I existed. I had just finished a 14-hour shift at St. Matthew's Medical Center in Chicago when the ambulance doors burst open near midnight. The ER had been unusually quiet for a Friday night. A teenager with a broken wrist. An elderly man with chest pain. A woman who slipped on ice outside her apartment building. Nothing I couldn't handle. I was signing discharge paperwork at the nurse's station when I heard the sound of frantic footsteps echoing across the polished hospital floor. Then I heard my mother's voice. I froze before I even turned around. Some sounds never leave you, no matter how many years pass. Please, she cried again, her voice trembling. Somebody help her. The paramedics pushed the gurney through the sliding doors while nurses rushed forward. My eyes landed on the patient first. Blonde hair tangled across the pillow. Pale skin. Oxygen mask. Weak movements. Emily. My younger sister looked nothing like the woman I remembered from family Christmas cards posted online every December. Gone was the perfect makeup, the bright smile, the expensive clothes she loved showing off in photos. She looked small now. Fragile. Human. My father walked beside the gurney in stunned silence, his gray coat half-buttoned and snow melting onto the hospital floor beneath his boots. He looked older than 72. Smaller somehow. The confident man who once told me to get out of his house and never come back could barely stand upright tonight. One of the nurses turned toward me quickly. Dr. Whitmore, we need another attending in trauma too. Then my mother finally saw my face. Her mouth fell open. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 5 years disappeared in one terrible heartbeat. Claire, she whispered like she wasn't sure I was real. I hadn't heard my mother say my name in half a decade. Not after the accusations. Not after Emily stood crying in the middle of our dining room, claiming I stole $48,000 from her savings account. Not after my father threw my suitcase onto the front lawn while snow fell around us. Not after my mother quietly said maybe everyone would be better off if I just left. I remembered every second of that night. The freezing wind against my face. The porch light shutting off behind me. Emily watching from the window while I dragged my suitcase through 6 inches of snow toward the bus stop. I was 29 years old and halfway through medical school when my family erased me like I had never belonged to them at all. And now here they were, standing in my emergency room, needing me. She's in acute liver failure, one of the paramedics said quickly while handing over paperwork. Blood pressure's unstable. Possible complications from unregulated medication use. My mother looked at me with tears streaming down her face. Claire, she said again, barely able to breathe. Please don't leave. I stared at my sister lying unconscious beneath fluorescent hospital lights while machines beeped steadily around us. 5 years ago, they chose her without hesitation. They buried me without proof. They never called. Never apologized. Never asked if I survived the winter after they threw me away. But at that moment, as the trauma team surrounded Emily's bed and my father stood trembling beside the wall, I realized something strange. The same family who erased me was suddenly depending on me to save the daughter they loved more. The smell of antiseptic always reminds me of winter now. Maybe because the worst night of my life happened during a snowstorm. While the nurses stabilized Emily in trauma too, I stood at the sink outside the room pretending to wash my hands longer than necessary. My fingers trembled beneath the hot water. Not because I was afraid for my sister. I did not know what I felt anymore. Shock, maybe. Or exhaustion from carrying memories I had spent years trying to bury beneath long hospital shifts and sleepless nights. Through the glass doors, I could see my parents sitting side by side in the waiting area. They looked uncomfortable together, like strangers forced onto the same delayed flight at an airport. My mother kept twisting tissues in her lap until they tore apart in her hands. My father stared at the floor without speaking. 5 years ago, they never doubted Emily for even a second. That was the part that stayed with me the longest. Not being accused. Not even being thrown out. It was how quickly they believed I was capable of betraying them. The memory still comes back in pieces sometimes. The dining room lights glowing too brightly overhead. My father standing beside the china cabinet with his jaw clenched. Emily crying perfectly into a folded napkin while my mother rubbed her shoulders. The money is gone, Emily whispered that night. And Claire had access to my banking information. I remember laughing at first because it sounded ridiculous. $48,000 was missing from the savings account our grandparents created for Emily years earlier. I had helped her organize the account myself during college. "You cannot honestly believe I would steal from her," I said. But nobody answered me right away. That silence changed everything. My father finally looked at me with disappointment, so cold it barely sounded human anymore. "Tell us the truth for once," he said quietly. I kept waiting for someone to defend me. My mother, my uncle, anybody. Instead, Emily started crying harder. "I knew she hated me," she whispered. "I just did not think she would destroy my future." Looking back now, I should have seen how rehearsed it all felt. Emily had always known exactly when to cry and when to stay silent. She understood something about people that I never did. If you sounded hurt enough, nobody asked for proof. The next few hours passed like a nightmare underwater. My father demanded my bank statements. My mother searched through my bedroom drawers while refusing to look me in the eye. Emily sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a blanket, as if she were the victim of some terrible crime. I remember standing there in disbelief thinking this could not possibly be happening to me. I was working 30 hours a week while attending medical school full-time. I barely slept more than 4 hours a night. I lived on vending machine coffee and microwave soup because every dollar mattered. Yet somehow my family decided I was secretly stealing from my own sister. Around midnight, my father carried my suitcase downstairs and placed it beside the front door. Snow covered the front lawn outside. Thick white flakes drifted beneath the porch light in complete silence. "You need to leave," he said without emotion. My mother finally spoke then, but only to say something I still hear in my nightmares sometimes. "Maybe some distance will help everybody calm down." Everybody. Not us. Not family. Everybody. Like I was already someone outside the house. Emily never said another word while I dragged my suitcase through the snow toward the bus stop 3 blocks away. But I remember glancing back once before turning the corner. She was standing at the window watching me leave. People always assumed Emily and I were close because we looked enough alike to be sisters in holiday photos. Same blue eyes. Same blonde hair. Same last names stitched onto Christmas stockings every December. But growing up inside the Whitmore house felt like living in 2 completely different worlds. Emily was sunlight. I was wallpaper. Nobody said it out loud, of course. Families like ours never did. My parents were respectable middle-class people from the suburbs north of Chicago. My father owned a small accounting firm. My mother volunteered at church bake sales and organized neighborhood charity drives every Thanksgiving. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family that mailed matching Christmas cards and never raised our voices in public. But inside the house, there was always an invisible scale measuring the 2 of us. And somehow Emily always outweighed me without trying. She had a way of making people want to protect her. Teachers loved her. Boys noticed her. Even when she forgot homework assignments or skipped responsibilities, someone always stepped in to rescue her before consequences arrived. I used to think maybe that was just what younger sisters were like. Softer, more delicate, more loved. By the time I was 14, I already knew the rules without anyone explaining them. If Emily forgot to clean the kitchen, I finished it quietly. If Emily needed help studying, I stayed awake tutoring her even during my own exam weeks. If Emily cried, the entire house stopped breathing until she smiled again. Meanwhile, nobody noticed when I was exhausted. I remember one winter during high school when I worked 20 hours a week at a grocery store while maintaining straight A grades because I was trying to save for college applications. Every night, I came home smelling like cardboard boxes and floor cleaner after stocking shelves until closing time. One evening, my father looked up from the television and asked if I could pick Emily up from cheerleading practice because she was tired. I had just finished a 6-hour shift after school. Emily had spent the afternoon practicing dance routines with her friends. Still, I grabbed my keys without arguing. That became my role in the family. The reliable daughter. The easy daughter. The one who never caused trouble because there was never room left for my problems after Emily filled the house with hers. Even in college, things did not change. I attended Northwestern on scholarships and student loans while Emily transferred schools twice because she could not decide what she wanted to study. My parents covered her apartment rent, car insurance, and spending money without hesitation. Meanwhile, I worked weekends at a diner near campus and survived on instant noodles more nights than I could count. Yet somehow Emily still described herself as the misunderstood one, the overlooked one. Looking back now, I think she genuinely believed it. That was the strangest part about Emily. She could stand in the center of every room, and still convince herself somebody else was stealing the spotlight. A memory surfaced while I reviewed Emily's medical chart at the nurse's station. She was 16. I was 19 and home from college for Thanksgiving break. My mother had baked pumpkin pies while snow collected outside the kitchen windows. Emily accidentally shattered one of the glass serving dishes while texting her friends at the table. The sound startled everyone. Before I could even react, Emily burst into tears. "Claire distracted me," she said immediately. My father sighed heavily at me from across the room. "Can you please be more careful around your sister?" I remember staring at him in disbelief, while Emily cried harder into my mother's shoulder. Nobody asked what actually happened. Nobody ever really did. That was how it started. Small moments. Tiny distortions of reality repeated over years until the truth itself stopped matching. By the time Emily accused me of stealing from her, my family had already spent decades practicing how to believe her first. After my parents threw me out, I spent the first 3 nights sleeping inside my Honda Civic in the parking garage behind the medical library at Northwestern. Chicago winters are not forgiving. The temperature dropped below 15 degrees that week, and every morning I woke up with my neck stiff from sleeping upright against the driver's seat. I kept blankets in the trunk and layered sweaters beneath my coat, but the cold still found its way inside the car at night. I remember watching my breath fog against the windshield while pretending this was temporary. Just a misunderstanding. Surely my mother would call after everyone calmed down. Surely my father would realize none of it made sense. But days passed, then weeks. Nothing came except silence. At first I still checked my phone constantly between classes. Every vibration made my chest tighten. But most notifications were only student loan reminders or pharmacy receipts for the migraines that started after I lost the apartment my parents had been helping me pay for during medical school. Eventually, I stopped expecting my family to reach out at all. That was somehow worse. Losing your home hurts. Losing the belief that someone will come looking for you hurts differently. During the day, I attended lectures pretending my life had not collapsed. At night, I worked extra shifts at a 24-hour diner near Evanston serving pancakes and black coffee to exhausted truck drivers and college students stumbling in after parties. My feet constantly ached. Some mornings I slept for 40 minutes in hospital locker rooms before anatomy lab started. I became excellent at surviving on almost nothing. One afternoon, about 2 months after I left home, I was sitting in the student lounge staring at an overdue tuition notice when Professor Harold Bennett quietly sat beside me. He taught internal medicine and intimidated most students because he rarely smiled during lectures. "You have not been yourself lately, Ms. Whitmore," he said while adjusting his glasses. I tried to tell him I was fine. Everyone says they are fine right before they fall apart. He studied me for a moment before sliding a folded piece of paper across the table. It was information for a hospital scholarship program connected to low-income medical students experiencing hardship. "You are one of the best students I have ever taught," he said calmly. "Do not let pride ruin your future." I nearly cried right there in front of him, which embarrassed me more than sleeping in my car ever had. That scholarship saved me. Not completely. Life still became brutally difficult after that. But it gave me enough stability to rent a tiny basement studio apartment 20 minutes from campus. The place smelled faintly like mildew year-round, and the radiator clanged loudly every time heat kicked on during winter nights. But it had a bed, a shower, a door that locked. For a while, that felt luxurious. Meanwhile, Emily's life looked perfect online. I could not stop myself from checking her social media sometimes, even though it always left me feeling hollow afterward. Beach vacations in Florida, birthday dinners at expensive restaurants downtown, family photos with my parents smiling beside her under Christmas lights. In every picture, the space where I used to stand seemed erased naturally, like I had never existed at all. Once, during my second year of residency, I saw my mother unexpectedly at a grocery store near Lincoln Park. She was comparing cereal boxes beneath fluorescent lights when our eyes met across the aisle. For one horrible second, I thought she might walk toward me. Instead, she looked away immediately and pushed her shopping cart in the opposite direction. I stood there frozen beside the freezer section, holding a carton of eggs while strangers walked around me. That was the moment I finally understood something painful. My family had not simply believed Emily's lie. They had chosen the version of reality that made it easier to lose me. By the time I finished residency, I had trained myself not to think about my family unless something forced the memories back to the surface. Work made that easier. Hospitals leave very little room for self-pity. Someone is always sicker than you. Someone is always grieving harder. During my 3rd year at St. Matthew's Medical Center, I became known as the attending physician who stayed calm during impossible shifts. Nurses trusted me. Residents respected me. Patients looked relieved when I walked into rooms because I listened before speaking. Maybe surviving abandonment teaches you how to recognize pain in other people more quickly. Life finally began feeling stable in small, ordinary ways. I rented a decent apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. I bought furniture that matched instead of whatever I found on clearance racks. Some evenings, I even sat on my balcony drinking tea while snow drifted softly across the city skyline. And for a few peaceful minutes, I could almost pretend the past belonged to someone else entirely. Then one rainy Tuesday in October, an email arrived from an address I did not recognize. The subject line simply read, "You deserve the truth." I almost deleted it without opening it. Hospital inboxes are full of strange messages. But something about those words made my stomach tighten. Inside was only a short paragraph and 3 attached screenshots from old banking records. Claire, I worked with Emily at First Northern Bank 5 years ago. I cannot stay quiet anymore after what happened to you. The transfers came from her own account. She moved the money herself over several weeks before accusing you. I kept copies because something felt wrong. I am sorry. My hands went cold reading those lines. I opened the screenshots slowly. Transfer dates. Account numbers. Emily's digital authorization signatures. $48,000 moved piece by piece into another private account under her control weeks before she accused me. I stared at the screen for a very long time while rain tapped against my apartment windows. Part of me thought I should feel vindicated, angry, triumphant. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Deeply tired in a way that reached places inside me. Sleep could never fix. Because the truth changed nothing about those 5 years. It did not erase sleeping in my car. It did not erase birthdays spent alone during residency while my family celebrated holidays without me. It did not erase the look on my father's face when he told me to leave his house. The next morning, I printed the records before work and locked them inside my desk drawer at home. I never contacted my parents. Never confronted Emily. Sometimes people imagine revenge feels satisfying. They imagine dramatic speeches and apologies delivered through tears. Real life is quieter than that. The truth is, by then I had already built a life without them. I had survived without their love. That realization frightened me more than the documents themselves. A few weeks later, I made the mistake of checking Emily's social media page again after nearly a year of avoiding it. She was posing beside a rooftop pool in Miami wearing oversized sunglasses and smiling into the camera like someone untouched by consequences. Another photo showed my parents visiting her new condo downtown with champagne glasses raised beneath decorative string lights. Caption, "Grateful for family always standing by me." I almost laughed out loud sitting alone in my kitchen. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable how completely Emily had rewritten reality. Then I noticed something strange beneath the perfection. In several photos, her face looked thinner than I remembered. Her smile sharper somehow. There was a brittleness around her eyes hidden beneath expensive makeup and filtered lighting. One video clip showed her hands trembling slightly while holding a drink at a restaurant table before she quickly lowered them beneath the frame. At the time, I ignored it. Doctors spend enough hours analyzing strangers without diagnosing family members through Instagram videos at midnight. But standing in the hospital 5 years later watching machines breathe beside my unconscious sister, I remembered those tiny details immediately. Sometimes collapse begins long before anyone notices. The emergency room looked different after 2 in the morning. Quieter. Harsher somehow. The bright, fluorescent lights reflected against polished floors while exhausted nurses moved between rooms carrying clipboards and paper cups of cold coffee. Outside the hospital windows, snow drifted across downtown Chicago in soft waves, covering sidewalks and parked cars beneath pale streetlights. Inside Trauma 2, Emily slept beneath heated blankets while machines tracked every fragile rhythm inside her body. Acute liver failure changes a person quickly. Her skin had taken on a faint yellow tint beneath the hospital lighting, and dark circles rested beneath eyes that used to appear constantly bright in photographs. One of the residents approached me near the nurse's station holding updated lab results. "Her numbers are worsening," he said quietly. "The transplant team is reviewing options, but finding a compatible donor quickly could become a problem. I nodded without speaking. My parents sat across the hallway in the waiting area like people stranded after a natural disaster. My mother had stopped crying an hour earlier, but grief still clung to her face. My father remained silent, elbows resting on his knees while staring at his folded hands. Age had caught him faster than I expected. The last time I saw him up close, his hair was only beginning to gray near the temples. Tonight it was almost completely white. Around 3:30 in the morning, the transplant coordinator arrived carrying a tablet and several folders. She spoke softly while reviewing Emily's records beside me. "We are checking extended family history now," she explained. "Based on preliminary testing, there may be compatibility concerns." Then she paused while reading another file more carefully. "Wait." Her eyes lifted toward me slowly. "You are her biological sister." I already knew what she was thinking before she said it out loud. "There is a strong possibility you could be a match." The hallway suddenly felt very still. My mother looked up first, then my father. Neither of them spoke immediately. I think they both understood how cruel life could be sometimes. 5 years ago, they decided I was dangerous enough to remove from their family completely. Now their favorite daughter's survival might depend on the same person they abandoned without hesitation. The coordinator continued speaking gently about testing procedures and timelines, but her words blurred together after a while. I only remember my mother standing slowly from her chair with tears filling her eyes again. "Claire," she whispered, "you would not have to do this." That sentence almost broke something inside me because it was the first kind thing she had said to me in years. Not because it was enough. It was not. But because for the first time since I walked through snow carrying a suitcase 5 years earlier, my mother sounded afraid of losing me instead of willing to let me go. I looked through the glass window into Emily's room again. Even unconscious, she somehow still seemed younger than me. Smaller. I wondered if she had ever once thought about what happened after I disappeared from their lives. Did she imagine me rebuilding quietly somewhere else? Did she ever picture the freezing parking garage where I slept inside my car? Did guilt ever touch her at all? A nurse adjusted Emily's oxygen tubing while monitors beeped steadily in the darkness. Then my father finally spoke, his voice rough and uneven. "We were wrong." For simple words. Too late to fix anything. Yet hearing them still hurt more than I expected. I kept waiting for anger to rise inside me after all these years. Some dramatic release. But standing there in blue scrubs beneath fluorescent hospital lights, I mostly felt sadness for all of us. Sadness for the family we could have been if truth had mattered more than comfort. My mother stepped closer carefully like approaching a wounded animal. "Claire," she said softly. "She asked for you before she lost consciousness." I turned toward her sharply. "What?" My mother wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. "The paramedics said Emily kept repeating your name in the ambulance." The idea that Emily had asked for me before collapsing stayed in my mind for the rest of the night like a song I could not turn off. I tried focusing on work instead. Chart updates, medication orders, consults from other departments. But every time I passed Trauma 2 and saw my sister lying motionless beneath hospital blankets, my chest tightened in ways I could not explain. Around 4 in the morning, the emergency room finally quieted enough for exhaustion to settle over everyone. One nurse dimmed the hallway lights, while another refilled stale coffee near the waiting area. Snow continued falling outside the hospital windows, soft and endless against the dark Chicago streets. My parents still had not left their chairs. I wondered if they were afraid Emily might disappear the moment they looked away. Eventually, my mother stood and walked toward me slowly while I reviewed lab results at the nurse's station. She looked fragile now. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone carrying years of guilt too heavy to keep holding upright. "You barely sleep, do you?" she asked softly. The question caught me off guard because it sounded painfully ordinary. Like we were mother and daughter again, discussing something harmless over morning coffee, instead of standing inside the ruins of our family. I shrugged slightly. "Doctors usually do not." She nodded, twisting her wedding ring nervously around her finger. "You look thinner than before." Before. Such a simple word for 5 missing years. I almost asked which version of me she remembered. The daughter who left home crying in a snowstorm or the stranger wearing hospital scrubs in front of her now. Instead, I said nothing. Silence had become easier for me over time. My father finally approached a few minutes later carrying 2 paper cups from the vending machine coffee station. He handed one to me awkwardly without meeting my eyes. "Still take it black?" he asked quietly. I stared at the cup for a second before accepting it. The coffee tasted burnt and terrible, but suddenly I remembered being 16 years old sitting beside him at the kitchen counter while he drank coffee before work every morning at 6:30 sharp. Strange how grief hides inside ordinary memories instead of dramatic ones. We stood there together in uncomfortable silence until my father finally exhaled heavily. "Your mother told me about the scholarship," he said. I frowned slightly. "What scholarship?" "The one your professor helped you get after you left home." He swallowed hard before continuing. "We did not know you were homeless." The word landed heavily between us. Homeless. I had never used it myself. Somehow hearing my father say it out loud made those years feel more real than ever. "There were a lot of things you did not know," I answered calmly. He closed his eyes briefly like the sentence physically hurt him. "Claire," he said quietly, "why did you never contact us after?" He could not finish the question. "After we threw you away. After we chose Emily over you. After we erased you from the family without proof." I looked down at the coffee cup, warming my hands. "Because nobody came looking for me," I said honestly. My mother covered her mouth immediately as tears filled her eyes again. My father looked like someone had knocked the air from his lungs. For years I imagined telling them everything if I ever saw them again. The freezing nights inside my car. The panic attacks during exams. The surgery I went through alone after my appendix ruptured during residency because there was nobody left to call as emergency contact. But standing there now, I realized something unexpected. I did not need revenge anymore. The truth already lived on their faces every time they looked at me. Just before sunrise, one of the nurses stepped out from Emily's room. "She is awake," she said quietly. Then she looked directly at me. "She keeps asking for her sister." Walking into Emily's hospital room felt stranger than I imagined it would. For years I pictured dramatic confrontations if we ever saw each other again. Angry speeches. Accusations. Some moment where all the pain inside me finally exploded into words sharp enough to wound her back. But real life almost never unfolds the way anger rehearses it. Emily looked small against the white hospital pillows when I stepped inside. Morning light had started creeping through the narrow windows, pale and gray against the snowfall outside. Machines hummed softly beside her bed while intravenous fluids dripped steadily through clear tubing attached to her arm. She turned her head slowly when she heard the door open. The moment our eyes met, she started crying. Not loudly. Not theatrically the way she used to when we were younger. These tears looked different somehow. Exhausted. Defeated. "Claire," she whispered weakly. I stayed near the doorway at first with my hands folded inside my coat pockets. Part of me still did not trust anything about this moment. Emily glanced down at the blankets covering her legs before speaking again. "You really became a doctor." The sentence almost sounded surprised. I did not answer immediately. "Yes," I said finally. "I did." Silence stretched between us while monitors beeped softly in the background. Then Emily closed her eyes tightly, like gathering courage for something painful. "I know about the donor testing," she said quietly. "Mom told me." I nodded once. "There is a good chance I am compatible." Her face crumpled instantly. "You should not do it." I stared at her in disbelief for a second because those were the last words I expected from Emily Whitmore. "Why?" I asked carefully. More tears slipped down her cheeks. "Because I ruined your life." The room suddenly felt colder despite the heated blankets surrounding her bed. Emily looked older now than the sister frozen in my memories 5 years earlier. Not physically, spiritually. Like carrying secrets had slowly hollowed her out from the inside. "I moved the money myself," she whispered shakily. "I transferred it over weeks into another account because I was drowning in debt and I panicked." My chest tightened, but I stayed silent. She kept talking anyway. At first I thought I could put it back before anyone noticed. Then Dad asked questions and I got scared. She wiped tears from her face with trembling fingers. "When they started suspecting something was wrong, I blamed you because," her voice cracked completely, "because they always believed me first." Hearing her admit it out loud hurt more than discovering the banking records ever did. Not because I needed proof anymore. Because deep down I had spent years hoping maybe there was some misunderstanding I could not see yet. Some explanation that made my family less cruel than they seemed. Emily looked at me with red, swollen eyes filled with shame. "I hated you sometimes," she admitted softly. "Not because you were mean to me. You were never mean. That was the problem. I frowned slightly. She let out a broken laugh through tears. You were stronger than me. Smarter. You survived things that scared me. Mom and Dad respected you even when they acted like they did not. She swallowed hard. I spent my whole life feeling like if people saw us side by side long enough, eventually they would realize you were the better daughter. The words hit me strangely. Not like vindication. More like grief for two sisters who never really understood each other at all. Emily started crying harder then, shoulders shaking beneath the hospital blankets. I never thought they would throw you out, she whispered desperately. I swear to God, Claire, I never thought they would actually let you disappear. I looked at my sister lying beneath fluorescent hospital lights while snow drifted softly beyond the windows. 5 years of anger stood between us. But for the first time since that night in the dining room, somebody was finally telling the truth. The donor tests confirmed compatibility later that afternoon. I signed the paperwork alone in a quiet consultation room overlooking the frozen parking structure where snow had piled along the edges of the concrete barriers. The transplant coordinator explained risks carefully while sliding forms across the table, but most of her words blurred together beneath the weight of everything else. At one point she paused and looked at me gently. You are doing something extraordinary, she said softly. I almost laughed because nothing about this felt extraordinary to me. It felt exhausting, complicated, human. My parents waited outside the room when I finished signing the documents. My mother stood immediately the second she saw me. Claire, she whispered, tears already forming again. I raised my hand slightly before she could continue. I am not doing this because what happened was acceptable, I said calmly. And I am not pretending the last 5 years did not happen. Both of them nodded silently. My father looked like he had aged another decade overnight. We know, he said quietly. There are no excuses. Strange how badly I used to want those words. Back when I slept inside my car beneath freezing Chicago skies, I imagined apologies would heal something inside me. But standing there now, I realized forgiveness does not erase survival. Some wounds close. Others simply stop bleeding after enough time passes. The surgery happened 2 days later. Hospitals become strangely peaceful before sunrise. The hallways were nearly silent when nurses rolled my bed toward pre-operation around 5 in the morning. Through the windows, downtown Chicago still glowed blue beneath the last traces of night. I remember feeling unexpectedly calm. Not because everything was resolved. Nothing about my family was resolved. But because for the first time in years, I no longer felt trapped inside the role they created for me. I was not the abandoned daughter anymore. Not the accused sister. Not the invisible child standing in someone else's shadow. I was simply Claire. A doctor. A woman who survived. Before they wheeled me into surgery, Emily's bed passed mine briefly in the hallway outside the operating rooms. She looked terrified beneath the hospital blankets. Our eyes met for only a few seconds. I am sorry, she whispered weakly. This time I believed her. Not because she deserved immediate forgiveness, but because guilt had finally stripped away the performance. I know, I answered quietly. The recovery was difficult for both of us, but successful. Within weeks, Emily's condition stabilized enough for doctors to feel optimistic about her long-term prognosis. My mother visited my recovery room every day carrying books, flowers, and homemade soup I barely touched. My father fixed things quietly because he never learned how to express emotion any other way. He replaced the broken lock on my apartment door after I casually mentioned it sticking during winter. He started texting me weather warnings before snowstorms. Small, awkward gestures from a man trying to rebuild something he shattered with his own hands. Emily stayed in therapy after leaving the hospital. So did I eventually. Healing turned out to be less dramatic than people imagine. No grand family reunion happened. No emotional Christmas movie ending waited for us at the finish line. Months later, we shared dinner together for the first time at a quiet Italian restaurant near the lake. Conversations stumbled awkwardly sometimes. Silences still stretched too long. Damage like ours does not disappear because one person finally told the truth. But something had changed beneath all the broken pieces. Accountability, humility, honesty. As we stood outside the restaurant afterward, snowflakes drifted softly through the streetlights around us. My mother reached for my hand carefully like she still was not sure she had earned the right. Do you think we can ever become a family again? She asked quietly. I looked at all three of them standing there beneath the cold Chicago sky. 5 years ago, losing them destroyed me. But surviving without them taught me something important too. Love means very little without truth beside it. I squeezed my mother's hand gently before letting go. I do not know, I answered honestly. But this time, if we try, it has to be real. After being falsely accused and abandoned by her own parents because of her younger sister's devastating lie, a successful doctor is forced to confront the painful past she tried to leave behind when her estranged sister suddenly arrives in the emergency room fighting for her life. This emotional story explores betrayal, survival, forgiveness, and the hidden damage caused by favoritism inside broken families. Viewers who love emotional family stories will connect deeply with this heartbreaking journey of a daughter who rebuilt her life alone after being erased by the people she trusted most. As shocking secrets finally come to light, the older sister must decide whether saving the sibling who destroyed her life will heal old wounds or reopen them forever. Filled with realistic emotion, quiet strength, and powerful moments of truth, this drama is perfect for fans of touching family stories about betrayal, redemption, and complicated relationships between parents and children. The younger sister's confession changes everything the family believed for 5 long years, forcing a mother and father to face the consequences of choosing comfort over truth. With strong emotional storytelling, realistic dialogue, and unforgettable hospital scenes, this is one of those family stories that stays with you long after it ends. If you enjoy deeply emotional family stories centered around forgiveness, resilience, and second chances, this powerful drama delivers a moving and realistic experience from beginning to end. Discover why so many viewers are drawn to family stories about survival, truth, and the painful journey of rebuilding trust after betrayal. Character 1. 40-year-old white American woman. Shoulder-length blonde hair. Blue eyes. Wearing dark blue emergency room doctor scrubs. Calm, exhausted expression. Front-facing portrait. Realistic cinematic lighting. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Emotional realism. Professional hospital atmosphere. Character 2. 35-year-old white American woman. Long blonde hair. Pale skin. Blue eyes with emotional sadness. Wearing elegant cream-colored sweater. Front-facing portrait. Realistic hospital lighting. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Vulnerable expression. Cinematic emotional realism. 1. A dramatic cinematic emergency room scene inside a modern Chicago hospital during a heavy winter snowstorm at night. Claire Whitmore is a 40-year-old white American female doctor wearing dark blue emergency room scrubs with tired blue eyes and shoulder-length blonde hair, slightly messy, after a long hospital shift. She stands frozen beside a hospital bed with emotional shock and restrained pain on her face while staring at her younger sister, Emily Whitmore. Emily is a 35-year-old white American woman with pale skin, long blonde hair, and fragile emotional features lying weakly in a hospital bed connected to medical monitors and oxygen tubing. Their elderly parents stand behind them looking devastated and guilty beneath harsh fluorescent hospital lighting. Snow falls heavily outside large glass hospital windows. The atmosphere feels emotionally explosive and painfully realistic, with cinematic shadows, reflections, polished hospital floors, and visible emotional tension between sisters. Realistic American hospital environment. Emotional confrontation. High realism. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Cinematic realism with detailed facial expressions and dramatic emotional storytelling. 122. Claire Whitmore alone inside a modest Chicago apartment overlooking Lake Michigan early in the morning after a long overnight shift at the hospital. She is a white American woman around 40 years old with shoulder-length blonde hair, tired blue eyes, and subtle emotional sadness hidden behind quiet strength. She wears dark blue hospital scrubs while standing beside a large apartment window, holding a black coffee mug with both hands. Snow softly falls outside the city skyline, while pale winter sunlight enters the apartment. Medical textbooks, paperwork, and a stethoscope rest on a nearby kitchen table. The apartment feels realistic, lived in, and emotionally lonely without appearing depressing. Claire's expression shows resilience, exhaustion, and dignity after years of emotional survival. Realistic cinematic lighting with soft reflections and cold blue morning tones. Detailed American apartment atmosphere. Quiet emotional realism. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Highly realistic emotional storytelling with natural human posture and cinematic detail. 1, 2, 3. Emily Whitmore standing alone inside a luxurious modern downtown Chicago condo during sunset with large windows overlooking the glowing city skyline. Emily is a 35-year-old white American woman with long blonde hair, pale skin, elegant makeup, and emotional exhaustion hidden beneath a carefully controlled expression. She wears expensive cream-colored casual clothing and lightly rests one hand against a marble bathroom counter while staring into a mirror with sadness, uncertainty, and emotional emptiness in her eyes. Beauty products, expensive decor, and soft golden apartment lighting surround her, creating the illusion of a perfect social media lifestyle, while subtle emotional tension reveals loneliness beneath the surface. The atmosphere feels cinematic, intimate, and emotionally realistic without glamour exaggeration. Detailed luxury American condo interior with reflections, warm sunset light, and realistic emotional body language. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Realistic cinematic emotional portrait with subtle storytelling and authentic human emotion. 1, 2, 4. A painful family confrontation inside a warm suburban Chicago dining room during winter 5 years earlier. Claire Whitmore stands beside the front door holding a packed suitcase while snow falls heavily outside the windows behind her. Claire is a white American woman in her late 20s wearing a dark winter coat with visible heartbreak, controlled anger, and emotional disbelief on her face. Across the dining room, Emily Whitmore sits near the family table, crying dramatically while wrapped in a blanket as their elderly parents stand nearby. The father points emotionally toward the door while the mother avoids direct eye contact with visible shame and confusion. Warm yellow dining room lights contrast against the cold, emotional betrayal happening inside the home. Family photographs, holiday decorations, and realistic middle-class American suburban details create a believable emotional environment. Cinematic realism with emotional tension, silence, and heartbreak visible in every expression. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Highly realistic emotional storytelling scene with cinematic lighting and authentic American family atmosphere. 1, 2, 5. Claire Whitmore surviving alone inside an old Honda Civic parked inside a freezing Chicago parking garage late at night during winter. Claire is a white American woman around 30 years old with messy blonde hair, exhausted blue eyes, and visible emotional fatigue while studying medical textbooks beneath dim, fluorescent garage lighting. Blankets, coffee cups, notebooks, and anatomy flashcards fill the small car interior while frost covers the windows from the cold weather outside. Claire wears layered sweaters and winter clothing while holding a pen over open medical notes with determination despite emotional isolation and exhaustion. The parking garage feels realistic, cold, empty, and emotionally heavy with concrete walls, soft shadows, and distant city sounds. The atmosphere communicates loneliness, resilience, and silent survival. Without melodrama. Cinematic realism with emotional depth, detailed textures, and natural body posture. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Realistic emotional storytelling with highly believable American urban survival atmosphere. 1, 2, 6. A quiet emotional ending outside a small Italian restaurant near Lake Michigan at night during light snowfall in downtown Chicago. Claire Whitmore stands calmly beside her younger sister Emily Whitmore and their elderly parents beneath soft streetlights reflecting across wet pavement after an emotional family dinner. Claire wears a dark wool coat over professional clothing while Emily wears a cream-colored winter sweater and long beige coat. Both sisters have pale skin, blonde hair, and emotionally exhausted expressions softened by honesty and emotional healing. Their parents stand nearby looking older, humbled, and quietly emotional as snowflakes drift through the cold night air. The atmosphere feels realistic, intimate, bittersweet, and cinematic rather than overly happy. City lights, restaurant windows, and passing cars create a believable urban American winter setting filled with emotional tension, cautious hope, and unresolved family history. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Realistic cinematic emotional storytelling with authentic facial expressions and natural human interaction.